Greetings, Warlords. Today we're taking a look at the Numidian Cavalry kit from Victrix. Many of you know this has been in the basement for quite a while, but the Carthaginian force is finally starting to take shape. In this video, we'll take a look at the sprue, get them built up, and try a new technique for painting horses. So in this kit, you get 4 of these sprues. That's enough to build 12 cavalry models. And looking at it, this is probably one of Victrix's more basic kits. Not too many extra frills on this one, but I think that's all right. So you get basically, 3 horse bodies per sprue, 3 riders. We got a cape here. 3 javelin arms, no choice of equipment there. We have these extra hands here holding javelins, and that's if you'd want to chop off the hands here on these guys and really festoon them with javelins. We've got an extra standard horn and a little sword there. 3 shields. So not going to have much extra left over, but we do have 6 heads here, so that's always great having extra heads and being able to use those on different kits. You'll end up with 12 extra. So we're going to get into the building of these, a little bit of the painting, and then we'll go over the goods and bads of this kit. But I do got to point out at this part here, though, every Victrix kit I've seen has come in these bags here. And it's cool because you can look inside and see, what's exactly on the sprue. But we know sometimes the Victrix pieces can be a little delicate. This one was pretty good. I guess note right up here, this little sword here is bent. And then more problematic, I think, is one of these horses is bent off its base. Now, you should be able to see, the horse should be oriented 90 degrees, and you can kind of see the angle here is a little bent. So it can definitely be bent back into place, but I'm a little nervous about that. It's probably going to require a little extra green stuff reinforcement. Now, that was the only horse like that in the kit that I found, so 1 out of 12 isn't too bad. Maybe this was due to shipping, through the mail. So if you're at a store, take a look in the bag and kind of make sure, everything looks good to you before picking it up. But other than that, everything looks good. The javelins here look fine, and we'll get to construction. So constructing these should be pretty easy. Everything is pretty much interchangeable, which isn't the case on many of the kits out there. So, this is kind of the way that I like to do it. So you can get a little assembly line going, and they should assemble in no time. So these went together pretty darn quick, wasn't too much to think about. Now I've already gone and glued the shields on here. On another batch, I did the horses separate from the riders completely. After painting both methods, my official advice is to paint the shield separate from the rider, but you can go ahead and glue the rider to the horse. It's not going to interfere with anything. Left arm sticks out quite a bit from the model, so you do need to get behind there and paint stuff, and the shield kind of gets in the way. Normally, I'm a just glue everything immediately together kind of guy, and if it's blocked, then you don't have to paint it, but not in this case. I'll say these guys had the usual amount of mode lines. Overall, pretty good. The rope around the neck is brilliant on these. No need to green stuff any necks, but there's a little gap at the front between the legs and on the back on the rump there that does need to get taken care of, either through green stuff or sprue glue if you're one of those guys. And of course you want to do that prior to priming unless you're a nincompoop like me. First step here is base coating with burnt orange. So for painting, we'll focus on one particular aspect of that, and it's going to be the horse this time. So if you've seen the Goth Cav review and the Arab Heavy Cav review, both of those, we were painting horses, and I've got a new technique I'm trying out for these Numidians. The Arab Cav was just using pure layering and what I call elbow grease painting. The Goths were using speed paints. Now, this is going to use speed paints as well, but in a different way, and also add in some layering, so it's kind of the best of both worlds as far as quality and time goes. Many of the Pro Acryl colors do cover in one coat, but this color is not one of those. So we'll hit her 2 times and then break out the speed paints. I'll be using 1 part Grim Black, 1 part Gravelord Gray to 2 parts Speed Paint Medium. This technique can be used to paint any kind of color horse you want. If you're going for a really lighter horse, then you might just skip the Grim Black and do 1 part Medium and 1 part Gravelord Gray, or, somewhere in between. Apply the speed paint liberally, starting at the bottom and working your way towards the top. You want to cover every part of the skin, but it's okay, towards the top bits where the highlights are going to be if you just barely apply anything. Once you're done, you do need to let this dry really thoroughly. I left the skin alone for the rest of the day, worked on a few other bits, and now we're ready to get back to some layering. For this first step, I'm using burnt orange once again. We're going to reestablish the mid-tone on some pretty large swaths of the model. But the nice thing is the speed paint is telling us where we need to go. The speed paints already gave us some highlights. We're just adding to them, and we're going to push them even further. And throughout this process, I'm not really being that careful. Just having fun, and if it gets a little sloppy, that's all right. Now, after the base coat's reestablished, you could actually call it good here. And if you chose a really light base color initially, you could probably call it good just after that gray-black speed paint coat. But we're going to press on here, mixing the burnt orange with a little bit of pale skin, which is my off-white go-to color. No matter what color I'm using, I'll just mix in the pale skin to get the highlight. Keeps it simple, and with each base color getting the same kind of wash and the same kind of tones in their highlight, we're going to have a really cohesive looking cavalry unit despite using a bunch of different colors. And I'm just going to keep it going with the highlights here. I'm going to do 3 in total. So the first layer covered maybe 75% of that reapplied base coat. The second we'll do 50%, and third we'll cover roughly 25%, and hopefully that's a helpful way to think about it. It's just a rough guide, and if you want to call it quits after a single or second highlight, that's also good. I have to say, though, each highlight layer goes quicker and quicker, so I'm all in on these highlights, and depending on the color, I might do more or less. I'm just going to eyeball it and finish when I think it looks good. So we can also go back and clean up the shadows if we want. Fine scale color gray graphene and flat black are great for this. And sort of with the speed paint, if you're doing a light color, the graphene might be enough, but otherwise a mix of the two seems to work well for me. This step is pretty optional, but I really want to emphasize the contrast from light to dark on these horses. Really want them to look good from a few feet away. Basically just making sure the bits that should be dark are nice and dark. Rounding it out, I'm just dry brushing the tail and the mane here with some more pale skin. Now, you may have noticed I haven't really highlighted those hairs around the horse's feet. So at this stage, you could go ahead and dry brush that area with this pale skin. I also could have done that earlier, at maybe the second or third highlight stage. And if I want to do some white socks or markings on the horse head, I'll usually save it for the very end. Now that the horse itself is pretty much done, I'll finish the rider, get it based, hit it with the matte varnish, and get a look at the final results here. Run free, wild steed! Run free! So this was the horse that was off kilter before as well. And once I glued on his other half, kind of twist him down and use the extra leg for like a 3-point connection with loads of plastic glue. Turned out fine. No green stuff needed. You'll also notice I trimmed off the back of the javelin. They were all kind of double-sided pokey bits. Not sure what that term is for the other end of the spear. That's just there for weight. I'm sure somebody knows and can post in the comments. And I just removed that for aesthetics. I kind of like how they look without it. And it is just a tiny smidge faster to paint that way too. As we pull back here, looking at the whole batch, I did paint up all 12, and I will be holding on to these for my personal Carthaginian force. I'm sure I might turn into a Numidian force as well at some point. So you can see the technique I use to paint the horse on all kinds of other horses here, and it works pretty well. You just pick a base color, and it's kind of autopilot from there. And I'm sure someone will have the question, but these are little big man shield transfers. And I did go back and kind of weather them up a bit after the fact. As far as the scale goes, I've lined them up against a few other cavalry miniatures I have here. That's a Victrix Macedonian Cav on the left, Gripping Beast horses in the middle, and Fireforge on the right. You can see these Numidian horses are definitely on the smaller side there. More ponies. I think that's fine. And you can also compare the paint style from the 2 previous reviews. We've got the Arab cavalry model, which was pure layering, and the Goth, which was speed paints with some additional elbow grease after the fact. I prefer the technique I used on these Numidians over both of those, but I do have an airbrush method that I prefer to this method, but that's a video for another time. Overall, I like the kit. It builds and paints up pretty quick. It's not complicated. Critique would be, even though there's extra heads, they are all pretty similar, and they're all wearing that same wrinkly tunic, so there isn't too much in the way of variety here. I know there's an infantry kit, maybe there's some interchangeability there, but overall, I think for the price, it's a pretty good buy. If you found this useful, please comment and like. I've got a few more reviews coming out in the near future, including one for that Macedonian cavalry model we saw. So if you don't want to miss out on those, please subscribe. All right, guys. Hope you have a great one, and I'll catch you later. SAGA! If you'd like to see more SAGA content, consider joining the Heathen Army over on Patreon, or popping on down to the SAGA Thursday Discord server. Links below. Thanks, guys.